Hello and welcome. I'm Leanne Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump's top team are in Moscow as they conduct peace talks with Vladimir Putin. The death toll from the Indonesian floods rises above 700 as rescue workers continue to search affected areas. And documenting Diddy, Netflix releases the much-anticipated Reckoning of Sean Combs, produced by industry rival 50 Cent. Now, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are in Moscow today as the US aims to end the war with Ukraine. It comes days after US and Ukrainian delegates gathered in Florida to fine-tune the US-backed peace plan, which has been viewed as favourable to Russia. Speaking ahead of the summit, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the administration felt optimistic. Take a listen.
The president's entire team, including Special Envoy Witkoff and Secretary Rubio and the Vice President and the President himself, Secretary Hegseth as well, have been working so hard on this effort, and they all really want to see this war come to an end. This is sort of the shuttle diplomacy that you've seen from this administration play out, where we speak equally with both sides. We've put points on paper. Those points have been very much refined, but as for the details, I will let the negotiators negotiate, but we do feel quite good, and we're hopeful that this war can finally come to an end.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Dubai 92 presenter Jono Hayes and correspondent and columnist Gemma White. Gemma and Jono, great to have you on the show with me. Jono, let's start with you, because I feel like we heard from Caroline Leavitt there. The White House has sounded pretty optimistic as these negotiations go on over the last couple of weeks. Donald Trump saying we're close to a deal. You know, it's all positive mood music from the US, but we're waiting for Trump's announcement and for more details to come out about these talks that are happening in Moscow today. But what's at stake? That's a big question here. And if Vladimir Putin will ever capitulate anything.
So what's really at stake here is whether we're actually moving closer to the war coming to an end, or whether we're watching play out at just another diplomatic false dawn, which is very possible. Trump's team obviously signalling the optimism that we're hearing there from Caroline Leavitt, which we know. The sticking points haven't changed on home turf back in Ukraine and in Moscow. We know that there's no change there. Russia still wants territory. Ukraine not going to hand over any is what they're saying. Europe is terrified that it's going to be boxed into a deal that in some way is going to compromise them from a security point of view. And also the long-term security for Europe is what is to the fore from them. And then okay, it's good news Putin is actually speaking now, which is a nice change on this as well, but he is likely to not want to budge on what he would like. So the red lines haven't changed from anyone's point of view. So saying that we're closer to a deal, I think, is just real optimism from the point of view of Washington, but they will want to portray that as what's something that's going to happen. We will know a little bit more after today, after the White House speaks, perhaps if the US is likely to get Moscow to slightly move and shift the Kremlin to make some decisions and actually be able to find a solution here. But as it looks on the surface, we're just watching more theatrics play out in front of us. That's it. Peace, territory, security guarantees, Europe's future stability, all these things need to fall into place. And that's a lot of moving parts, a lot of cogs that need to go into place.
I did find it really interesting because today we heard from Vladimir Putin. He had an investment forum, and at that investment forum, he touched on what was happening and on the talks. And he spoke quite openly, actually. He said that European Sikh demands are not acceptable to Russia. So he's basically said that straight off the bat. Europeans do not have a peaceful agenda. They're on the side of war. And if Europe wants to fight war, we are ready now. So this was all ahead of his talks with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And many people were saying, was he pitch rolling to basically say, we're not going to accept any demands you're here with, but we're prepared to talk?
It was like he was already getting his talking points out there, right?
I think that's what he wanted to do.
Again, switch the narrative onto Europe this time.
And I think that's, again, he's a great, he plays that part really well. But what Moscow wants is those security guarantees, limitations. They don't want NATO involved in that. That's a disaster for them, and they know that. And I think that's where Europe will probably panic a little bit. But then you've got the Trump administration knowing that Europe does everything far too slow for Trump to be satisfied with. They're concerned that this is a rushed deal, when in fact it's quite the opposite. This has been planned out. The 19 points have been in there, reduced down from the 29 points. We've known that already. This has been thought out as a process, but it's not moving fast enough for Trump's liking, and that's why we're seeing the interjection of the White House right now.
So, Gemma, let's talk a little bit about that, because we've obviously seen lots of plans about plans, and we've never reached a ceasefire agreement. Sticking details are still obviously the same as they've been for a long time. Do you think Ukraine is going to have to put up its hands and give away some territory and say, OK, this is the only option we have on the table? We're still getting bombarded by Russia. We're losing people. Apparently, according to reports today, Provosk, a very, very strategically important place Russia claims they have. I mean, Ukraine are kind of backed into a corner.
I do wonder here if we've got what does Ukraine want to do and what might they ultimately be forced to do once they're brought to the table. Because at the moment, they're not at the table again. Neither's Europe. This is just US and Russia talking. Now, territory has always been the biggest and most contentious issue. And as you said, it has not changed since the very start. No one's budged at all on this. And Zelensky has been very firm. He's called it the territory is the most difficult, subject that they're moving around. Now, he has repeatedly said, he hasn't changed his tune either, that he's not going to, cede any territory. There are reasons for him, sticking to this. If he cedes territory to Russia, it could further embolden Russia to think, we have this territory, where are we going to look next? It's not what the majority of Ukrainians want. It's not what, the people he represents want. Now, implementing this, say they cede territory, the amount of administrative, legal, security, humanitarian issues, this will go on for years and years and years. What all of those issues will throw up if territories are given to Russia or returned to Russia, however you see it. Now, as you said earlier, the fears are that this peace plan is going to be more favourable to Russia. What we could see then is stronger ties, again, between the US and Russia, which would put Europe's kind of out. Europe's kind of not at the table anyway, but perhaps further away from the table. Europe has a lot of fears, namely that this plan is not going to weaken Russia or prevent them from looking further afield next time.
And I think Europe has real security concerns, and I think this is a big problem because, like you said, if they do cede this territory, where is Russia going to stop? And I think Europe is also in the position that a lot of them think we're NATO countries, the US promised to support us, and now we feel kind of isolated in this situation.
If Zelensky runs the risk, which he does now, if he rejects the plan from the US's point of view, he runs the risk of losing the US support, which is something he can't have happen. We're 11 years into the wider conflict, 3 years and 9 months into the main conflict that we're experiencing right now. It's always been the sticking point whereby Zelensky is going to have to concede territory. How much territory that is comes down to what this peace plan and process puts into place if it comes off. But I think he's losing a battle with the US if he thinks he's going to concede no territory. We know that it's part of their plan. Europe have got it. In part of the 19 points, it says that there will be territories lost by Ukraine. He can't dig his heels in for much longer and continue to get the support of the US and garner support from Europe if you've given somebody an out and a solution of sorts that keeps Russia at bay. Yes, they're right to be concerned, of course. Russia may go in and take more land, but the concessions there's a plan there.
And I also wonder, we speak a lot about Europe in this war that's been happening for a long time and been frozen out of talks, but Europe have done a lot for Ukraine financially, giving them weapons. Europe have been by their side. When the White House Oval Office went so wrong, we saw Zelensky fly to meet Keir Starmer in the UK. Zelensky's in Ireland today. There's been so much support for Zelensky, but how long can Europe keep bankrolling this for is going to be the big question too, because we see in Europe lots of countries have their own financial crisis at the moment.
Yeah, his visit, I saw figures of like 125 million was promised. from his visit to Ireland. Some of it financial aid, some of it, I don't think military was mentioned, but...
So they can't. I mean, they're not a NATO country. Ireland
Yeah.
are part of the EU, but it's a chance to go and visit another country that's in the and thank them for humanitarian support, which is what this was. It's been kind of framed as a diplomatic refuel more than anything else. Landing there is a safe bet. It's not a NATO country, you know, but it's still within the EU, and so it was unplanned. It was a brief stop, and it was just it was exactly that. A thank you for your humanitarian assistance that you've sent so far, which has been more than generous. However, he would have to probably do that to a lot more countries in order to continue garnering support. He may have an out here, being given to him by Donald Trump, silver platter kind of a vibe. And as we know, the administration, Trump himself, does not bode well to somebody who says, thanks for your deal, I'm not okay with it, I'm not going to take it, and you run the risk of losing support.
And the problem is what happens if they lose the US support?
Yeah.
And, you know, we can see that Europe's been on the back foot and peddling all this way through it. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's see if we get any more lines as the day goes on. Now let's move on to another story. The recent floods in Indonesia have killed over 700 people as rescue workers continue to search affected areas. Around 1 million people have been evacuated, with thousands cut off and without critical supplies. Thailand, Malaysia and Sri Lanka have also been affected by cyclones and storms. Gemma, this is a truly devastating disaster. If we have a look at the pictures, it's becoming quickly one of Indonesia's deadliest natural disasters in years. Why? Where did this come from?
So it's the death toll has now surpassed 700. That's 3.2 million people affected. That's across Thailand, Malaysia and Sri Lanka. Now, this is quite a rare occurrence. What you've had a very rare cyclone hitting 3 provinces at the same time as the heaviest monsoon rains. So it's not something that happens on a regular basis, but it's just the timing has occurred. Now, the water came very, very fast. We will see from the images, you know, the villages have been swept away, roads covered, bridges collapsed and swept away because of the speed at which this was moving. Now, you've got thousands of people still cut off from, you know, there's no internet, so it's very hard to contact people. Critical supplies are not going to be able to get through because of the roads are gone. And now, after the floods start to subside, you're going to face all these problems which come from a natural disaster, which is the lack of clean water, the spreading of disease, the hospitals full, aid workers unable to get there. But really, it was, to use a kind of terrible term, it was the perfect storm because you had all these elements coming together as well. Now, there's been a lot of criticism for the government, which in times like this is perfectly natural. Indonesia has not declared a state of emergency, which Sri Lanka actually has. Now, critics say that the authorities were not prepared for these floods and that they should have been. And also that there's a lot of red tape, bureaucratic red tape, which has prevented aid services from being able to move quickly. So you've got a lot of things as well. The storms happened, and now you've got a lot of stuff, happening in the aftermath.
Yeah, it's really sad. And I did speak to somebody, a journalist in Jakarta earlier, and she was really interesting. Her name was Divyanti, and she was saying to me that she had people that she couldn't contact for days, and that's basically because they didn't have cell phones. Everything was washed away. So it's that panic through everyone, even if you live in the big cities and your family and friends aren't there. It's that the whole country is affected by this. But Jono, 1 million people have actually been evacuated. I think just to put that humanitarian crisis into context is huge.
It's huge, but also 500,000 people are missing. So a death toll of 700 is a very, unfortunately, it's a low ball estimate on how many are going to actually have perished in this as well. But we're talking, exactly like Gemma said, villages that have been completely unreachable by foot or any other means. The bridges are gone, the roads are destroyed. The humanitarian crisis that will now ensue is going to be astronomical. Hospitals are simply overwhelmed. We don't know what the situation is like with hospitals which are within areas which have been completely cut off because we've got no communication with them. And the operation is stretched across these 3 different provinces as well. So it's, yes, one of the largest natural disasters Indonesia and the region, in fact, has faced in years. But the scale of the emergency response is absolutely enormous here. And it will require the entire world to come to the fore to support this at a time like this. And again, there's a lot of speculation as regards what may have caused this. And Indonesia, for one, has fallen victim of the last couple of years of massive deforestation, massive mining.
A lot of it has been down to palm oil in Indonesia, the deforestation. So there's been lots of, in Indonesia, a big drive to stop that happening.
And the reason behind that is quite logical. If you look at it on the surface, it will stop the water running down the hill at a very fast rate if there are more trees there. And also the soil will be able to take on more water if there was roots from trees there. If you've had deforestation, you've had mining, you've got large gaps where the water is able to run into the area. So a fair criticism to say that the country's government probably were not prepared for this. In saying that, it's of such an enormous scale that it's very difficult to brief and prepare any emergency services for something that you've never had to deal with before. And I think 700, that number is going to go into the thousands if 500,000 people are still missing in Indonesia alone. It's going to be horrific.
And we think about it, but a lot of these economies, they rely on agriculture, you know, to grow their own crops, to sell them to their own villages. It's one of those economies that runs that way. You know, people are self-sufficient and also sell what they grow. And tourism is a massive thing in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and a lot of these parts of Asia. And just Christmas coming up. So, you know, we've seen this horrendous natural disaster, but there'll probably be the ramifications for years to come, possibly.
Yeah, at a time of year when they were expecting money to be coming in, that's now going to be completely cut off. And the effects of this are going to be reverberating through generations. We've seen the government has sent, you know, 34,000 tons of rice, but, you know, how is that going to get there? How many people is that going to feed? So, yeah, the ramifications are huge.
And exactly as you said, from the tourism point of view, I think that's where a lot of people will have chosen to spend their holidays. As we know, anything like this, a war zone, a natural disaster, earthquakes, specifically in that area is quite prone to earthquakes, have the knock-on effects for years and years. Tsunamis is another one. And something like floods kind of puts the frighteners of people for a very, very long time afterwards. The last thing you want is to go on a holiday and get stranded. And we're seeing so much on social media of people who are struggling to get back out again, of areas that have been completely cut off. So I think, unfortunately, the knock-on effects will last, like Gemma said, for many years down the line from this, unfortunately.
Thank you for your thoughts on that, Jono and Gemma. Let's move on now. And the UK government is unveiling plans to tackle a High Court backlog with jury trials possibly limited to the most serious crimes. Justice Secretary David Lammy warns delays are leaving victims waiting for years for a trial to come off the ground. So this is such an interesting story that's been coming out of the UK. It's been sort of drip, 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 drip. We had a bit of a leak and now we're getting more information. I mean, tell us about it, this big shake-up of the justice system.
So here's the issue. The government have said they've been handed kind of this poison chalice when it comes to court cases. 80,000 people currently waiting for a jury trial, which is an astronomical number of cases to try and get through. And for those of you who don't know how a jury trial system will work, the process and the amount of dates that is required just to get to court and to get to the bench with a case with a jury is quite significant. Jury selection, it's an expensive process. Jury trials, by definition, cost a lot of money. Ireland, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand all still have jury trials. The US also. But most of the rest of the world simply do not, because it's not very efficient and it may not be the best way to handle things. Normally, if it's a case that is low enough to be heard in perhaps a district or a circuit court, that can be heard by the judge, who will be judge, jury and sentence, and executioner effectively in all of the cases. When it goes to High Court or perhaps in a circuit court whereby it's felt that it's need to be heard by a jury, that's when the jury comes into play. It is very long, it is very drawn out as a process, and 80,000 cases will be a very long backlog. People are waiting 5 years even from their prosecution through until when they are sentenced. It's very inefficient as a system. So moving it to this, it's not that they're saying it's an overhaul, massive, for the entire justice system for England and Wales, but it's a justice system which is archaic and has been around for hundreds of years. And perhaps the time may be to move it on and just do something a bit more efficiently, because this is not that.
It's been such an interesting debate happening over in the UK because, Jono, like you say, 78,000 cases waiting to be completed in the Crown Court. There's this crazy backlog of judges. A lot of it started in the COVID era and it's never really recovered. But the big problem is, Gemma, you know, we talk about this overhaul and we say it's good to just have a judge and cut out the jury when it comes to cases that are more lower grade cases. We're not talking about murder, we're not talking about rape or sexual assault. But does this protect the justice system, or does it undermine it? Because I think this is the important thing that we need to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's very... what I want to say, first of all, is that the UK can be very resistant to change. You know, you're calling for change, and I absolutely agree with you. But as a nation, very slow-moving, very resistant, often quite backward-looking. I can say that as a British person, I feel.
The Magna Carta.
Exactly. We're going to hark back to the Magna Carta. I think the questions arrive with, will these reforms sacrifice justice for productivity? Now, also, how will the public perceive these changes? Will they feel that something's being taken from them, or that the establishment is trying to get one over on them? You know, this is going to be very much a PR battle as well to kind of get these reforms through. There are benefits and there are drawbacks. Now, for me, the benefits are more efficient trials and a reduced backlog. You know, the 78,000, 80,000 is absolutely enormous. Victims will get swifter outcomes, so they're not just putting their lives on hold for the 5 years, you know, that it takes for their case to be heard. And the reduction of jury bias. You know, more often, juries can be biased, you know. People come in with their own, you know, way of looking at life, their own prejudices.
Hard to choose a jury.
Yes, that's why jury selection takes such time, and it adds to the backlog. Now, critics have pointed to the fact that if you lose a jury, you also lose society feeling that they're somehow involved in their legal system, which they are. So you're losing the community checks and balances here that you know, it comes from people's investment in this. There's perhaps a loss of the feeling of transparency. A big concentration of power in institutional hands. And, you know, rightly or wrongly, judges in the UK often come from a certain class because they've, had the money to, you know, get themselves through, you know, law school and work their way up the ranks. And if you've got someone from the upper middle classes or upper classes as the judge, there's going to be a real... You're going to increase the distance, a kind of them and us feel, if you have perhaps someone from working class appearing in the dock. I think it's just going to create further distance, you know, and the class system already does that in the UK. And I also think there's the risk of institutional bias and corruption. You know, judges have their own worldview as well, you know, when they're looking at someone in the dock. So benefits and drawbacks for me, I think it's a great idea. I think it does need to be reformed, but there are lots of hurdles to get across first.
And I think this is exactly what we're seeing, because it still has to go for a vote in the Commons. And obviously the Labour whips would want the MPs to vote in line with Lammy, but so many critics of this from within the Labour Party say we're not going to vote in line with the whip. We don't think these reforms will clear the backlog like they wish to clear, and they want something else that's different.
And I think that's probably what realistically is needed, is kind of an interim, because now that this magistrate will be allowed to hand down periods of incarceration of up to 12 months, which is double what they're currently allowed to do, and it would be again a judge-only trial in that situation. If there was a lower court, so we're not quite at high court level, but we're talking drug offences which are not international drug trafficking, we're talking minor theft. I don't think we should be talking about violent and sexual assault offences, which this would be in part of the remit, which I think still need to be reserved for high court cases and to be heard by judge and jury. But if there was another interim system that was in place, that's not quite the High Court, but not quite circuit.
But then it's money again.
It's money, but again, 80,000 cases can't sit there for 5 years with nobody hearing them and not going to court. It's archaic.
To be honest with you, I actually think David Lammy has been quite bold in the reforms here that he's come out and spoken about, because it was leaked a few weeks ago, came across a lot of criticism. He's rolled with it. He's gone and spoke about it in the Commons. But I find the whole thing quite interesting, because all of this came out of the fact that a retired Court of Appeal judge, Sir Brian Levison, actually came up with these series of proposals after being asked to do so by the Lords to clear the backlog. So he came up with these, and Lammy's kind of run with it. And one thing we can't forget is the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was the head of Crown Prosecution in the UK, so he was a top lawyer. So the whole government must have seen this. And
they're aware of the plans. It's not a bad plan. It's just that
I don't think it's a bad plan.
Getting past the naysayers, which will say that this is a complete change. But then again, the system is so archaic. I think Gemma mentioned earlier, this system has been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
You can't take something that is hundreds of years old and say that works for the current way that we do things. Crime rates have skyrocketed. You need to have a different way of doing things. It can't be the same.
And, you know, just talk about you're not guilty until you're proven guilty. You know, you're innocent until you're proven guilty. And we're talking about a lot of people here who have lived 5 or 6 years of their life in limbo.
Yeah.
They still haven't had a court case. They can't get a job. They can't move forward. They can't contribute to the economy. It's a really difficult cycle to get trapped in if you're in that situation.
And likewise for people who are guilty and who are potentially out on the street. They're likely not to have been incarcerated for the period of time that they've been on bail effectively. These are dangerous criminals who are roaming the streets because the system can't get through them quick enough. And there will still be the prerequisite that you will have to be proven guilty beyond any reasonable doubt, which the judge will have to do that instead of it being your peers instead. Juries make mistakes just as much as judges do. We've seen that happen in the past.
We're human. We all make mistakes, don't we? Yeah, but it's really interesting to see. Let's see what happens. I'm going to be watching that vote when it comes up in the Commons to see who is going to side with their own party. Stay right there as we move on to another story now. And Netflix have released the much-anticipated Diddy documentary produced by longtime rival and rapper 50 Cent. Sean Combs' The Reckoning features footage that was filmed just 6 days before the music mogul's arrest in September. Combs is currently serving a 4-year prison sentence after being found guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. Here's a clip of what we can expect from the show.
We have to find somebody that'll work with us that has dealt in the dirtiest of dirty business. We're losing.
Puffy, Puff Daddy, Sean Combs. All of these reincarnations, all those name changes are attached to really bad deeds.
Everything in life, you're gonna have people that are bad and people that are good. You have to choose your side.
Well, Gemma, cannot wait to watch this. 4-part series will be coming out. Let's talk a little bit about all of this and what's happening. So 50 Cent, as we said, has had a big part in producing this. He's had a long time public feud with Diddy, Sean Combs, you know, Puffy. You know, we heard loads of name checks there.
Yes.
Do viewers risk getting a biased portrayal of Diddy, or is it in the public interest to actually have this 4-part Netflix documentary?
So I think the documentary will likely be biased, but I think show me a documentary that isn't influenced by the director's worldview, that isn't, you know, influenced by the producers. So yeah, but 50 Cent has not changed his view in like decades, you know. It's not really a feud because it's more like 50 Cent's been trolling him like for years and years and years, but also over the years has been expressing concern about the parties Diddy throws, about the energy he gives off. It's well documented, all the things that he said, you know, and he's never shied away from that. On his part, Diddy has shied away from getting involved in a feud with 50 Cent, perhaps because he knew that 50 Cent could do a lot of damage if he said certain things that he truly wanted to go public with. Diddy's always professed his love for 50 Cent. I don't want to be in a feud with you, but 50 Cent has never kind of took the hand of friendship that Diddy has been so desperate to hold out to him. Do I think this is in the public interest? I absolutely do. And I'll tell you why. The director, Alessandra Stapleton, she's an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. And she's talked about how what you're going to see in the footage, and it comes out today, doesn't it? So you're going to see a very rich and powerful man strategizing with his legal team about how he can fix the situation he has found himself in. And I think it gives us a peek behind the velvet curtain, not only of celebrity, but of super powerful celebrity. I think it can be quite hard to realise or to understand just how powerful P. Diddy was / still is, you know, only time will tell in the music industry. He was the man. And so we are getting this look at what the super wealthy do when they want to get something fixed.
And we can't forget P. Diddy. You know, he had this big, big clothing line. Not only that, he discovered Justin Bieber, he discovered Usher. You know, I look at the back in my life, Usher, you know, Puff Daddy, they were all, he was massive.
He launched J-Lo.
Yeah, J-Lo.
Yeah.
He sort of owned what was sort of current at that time, if we look at it. But, you know, I think what's really interesting is I did see an interview that 50 Cent did give a little bit earlier about the production of this, along with the lady that you just mentioned. And he was saying it's not biased because they speak to everybody from Diddy's walks of life. So they speak to 2 jurors who actually made that final decision of the case of Diddy. And they speak to childhood friends and people who really supported him and known him for a long time and spoken to people from the other side of the aisle. So I think they've said that there is balance in it, which will be interesting to see because it's going to be a difficult one.
Well, it's going to be a messy one, that's for sure, because what we know that's in there is personal footage. Now, Diddy's team have said that personal footage was shot for Diddy's own lifelong documentary. I don't know how he was going to spin the story.
Yeah, they said he started filming himself when he was 19.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I don't know how he was going to spin this into something that was Diddy-centric, that shone a good light on him, but he said that it wasn't meant for public release. It's certainly not for a series that was produced by somebody who he's had, and Gemma's enlightened me because I honestly had no idea what the beef was or what issue they had between them. But they don't like each other. Yeah. It's effectively, it's Donald Trump making a Biden documentary and just saying, here it is, here's what I think, here's what my view is on this guy. It raises that ethical question. Diddy's been proven guilty on some of the charges, okay, and then on the rest, which he continues to deny the allegations of, not so much. However, he is still incarcerated currently, which means that he doesn't really have the right to reply on this when it gets released because he is under federal state control, so he doesn't have the right to reply.
But his lawyers will still be able to have a right of reply.
And their right of reply is, we want to cease and desist. We want you to stop. We don't want this to get out into the public. We would like to have time to come back and to rebuttal this in video or otherwise form. He can't respond. So releasing personal footage without crossing the line is where this is going to get very messy for Netflix. And they have, again, it's much like when we mentioned the juries, they've made mistakes before. So if they release something that is damning or incriminating or affects the current ongoing proceedings, because he is waiting for sentencing, that's where it becomes messy.
So it's quite interesting because I did speak to a lawyer a little bit earlier and I asked him about this and he said it's very difficult in the United States to actually do that. It's very difficult to do a cease and desist and stop this because of your rights to be able to have an opinion and on free speech. And it's obviously very difficult. And we've seen this time and time again, especially in the entertainment world, to prove defamation. And the director said she obtained the footage legally, but you know, Puff Daddy says it was fundamentally unfair and illegal to use his private footage. But you're right, that could be the sticking point. But I think Netflix might be watertight. I don't know, that's my opinion. Don't know what you think, Gemma.
They haven't previously been, right?
But even if they're not watertight, they've got the time and the money to fight this. But yeah, earlier you raised a baby reindeer.
Baby reindeer, there's been other ones as well. The Tinder swindler has taken him to court as well now. Not because Netflix have made mistakes, but because they've portrayed people without having that balance that is so important when it's a documentary.
Yeah, it will be interesting to watch it and see. But obviously, you know, Sean Combs has always said that he was innocent the whole way through this. And now we did see him serving out a sentence and he is doing time in jail. And it will be interesting to see how this is received from the public and what the interest is in it. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that. And finally, we've reached that point in the show where Jono and Gemma have come up with a couple of quirky stories of the day. Gemma, yours is about this highly anticipated restaurant opening right here in Dubai, where we all are.
Already open.
Already open. Yes. Tell us, it's because it has a high-tech chef.
It has an AI chef.
Not the
File
one
that under only in Dubai, obviously, yes. This is restaurant called Woohoo in Dubai, and an AI chef has taken over the menu. So what they've done, they've fed into the technology data on taste combinations, food chemistry, and guest preferences. And the chef, called Chef Ayman, AI Man, has come up with this menu. So tell me if you would be ordering this, Jono, okay? It's come up with dinosaur tartare. Now, dinosaur tartare is meant to recreate the taste of extinct reptiles and, here's the kicker, is served on a pulsating plate that appears to be breathing.
Let's not ask the vegan on that.
No.
Again,
We cannot ask Leanne about this.
it's one of the last bastions. Let's not lose our chefs to AI and something like this. It doesn't sound overly appetizing, but it does sound very Michelin-esque.
Yeah,
does it
okay.
not?
Is the pulsating plate? Yeah, because,
Yeah,
you know, in
pulsating.
Michelin restaurants, they do, you know, a lot of the theatrics. You remember the soil? They would make soil and then, you know, bubbles and things like that. So, but yeah, we've also got seaweed butter. Which is Wagyu cooked in a Japanese clay pot. So some have just got, you know, great names, and they are, you know, things that you know, one might enjoy. Now, the co-founder of Woohoo has said that Chef Ayman will one day become, quote, the next Gordon Ramsay, but AI. Would love to get Gordon Ramsay's perspective on that. Obviously, he's famously, you know, reticent when talking about this kind of thing. Luckily for chefs, though, so any chefs, you know, do not worry, because in recent polling, it found that out of 366 jobs, that chefs were the 213th least likely to lose their jobs to AI.
And I think people always want to eat.
Yes.
Don't
Yeah.
they?
And it's an
Restaurants
art.
are always popular.
It's an art.
Hospitality.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
In
an
itself.
art. It's hospitality. I must admit, I'm looking at this restaurant. I am vegan for anyone who's watching, so a Woohoo dinosaur breathing on a plate is not really my thing.
Does sound very
Looks
fair.
But
cool
sounds
though,
very-
right?
It looks so
Yeah,
cool,
yeah.
doesn't it? I love the idea of the technology, the AI, how different it is. I don't know if it's somewhere I want to go every day, but I love the fact that it's so different and it's something we just haven't seen before. It's so cool.
I would love to know how AI has replicated what it thinks dinosaur tastes
Dinosaur
like. I bet it
tastes
tastes like chicken. Everything does, doesn't they say that?
Most
Everything.
things do.
Or crocodile. Wouldn't it
crocodile
taste
tastes like
crocodile?
chicken.
Well, it tastes like fishy chicken.
So,
Yeah,
chicken fish.
something like that.
Fishy chicken.
Fishy chicken.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Do they have anything vegan? If they don't, I better write to this AI bot chef.
We'll write to Chef Ayman.
I'm going to.
And ask him to come up with some vegan dishes
that's a
on
good
a
idea.
pulsating plate for you.
Not pulsating.
Right, you
I don't
don't
want
want it
anything
pulsating, that's
pulsating. And let's move on now to Jono's and finally talk about, you know, different things. Breaking up before Christmas. It's the countdown to Christmas. What's happening? So
Well, here's the
apparently if
date.
you're going to, like, lock it off, as the kids say.
there's
You're going to save money over
Lock
Christmas.
it off.
The advice is don't drag it out. If a couple is already halfway out the emotional door, then now is the time to do it instead of fake smiling your way through the festive season. The 11th of December is the cut-off time. If you're not going to break up with somebody before the 11th of December, then
So
you need
it's the
to wait.
second today.
You've got to stick it out.
So what, you've got
Got 9 days.
No,
Got 9 days.
Yeah, 9 days to go.
Can't do maths.
If you haven't done it by then, you need to wait until January 3rd to the 7th, which is when the highest rate
Yeah,
of breakups are likely to happen.
Right, okay.
But if you break it up now, you've allowed enough time to go between now and the period of time when Christmas actually hits, and therefore you're not going to be having to, first of all, shell out on a gift for somebody who you're no longer going to have in your life in the new year. New year, new you. Second of all, you've allowed enough time between this breakup period and when it hits the 25th, so they're probably not crying into their turkey on Christmas Day. That would be the ideal scenario. But if you're going to break it off, sooner rather than later is the way to go. Merry Christmas.
11th is the cut-off date.
11th is the cut-off.
Right, okay.
9 days to go.
If you
Yeah,
want to be
you've got 9
single for the
days.
festive season, you need to do it in the next 9 days. Otherwise, you got to have a heart and you got to wait until January the 3rd, which is a long time away.
Which I think is also the highest, January is the highest month for the divorce rates, when the most divorces are filed. And that's always sort of made me laugh a little bit. Is that because you spend Christmas with them, you have time off work, and then you realise, oh my gosh, his family are awful.
You are, you
he's
spend
awful.
24/7
And then do
together,
you
right?
think that's when it kind of like hits you
Absolutely.
that I don't
Oh,
want
it's
to be with them?
I think that's
Because
why
always thought-
COVID
Yeah.
was so testing for so many people,
Yeah.
where you went, you know what? Being in a house for this amount of time with the same person, I can understand why murder happens.
Yeah.
And that's what you're experiencing, I think.
So you
that's
think
it.
that happens over Christmas?
Yeah.
Or I think if someone bought me a really rubbish gift, I would
Would that make you see them in like a completely different light?
Yeah. Yeah, it would, because you got, you know, it's not nice, is it? No one wants to receive junk.
If you're breaking up now, no gifts will be exchanged. Problem solved.
Well,
You
there
don't
we
get
are.
anything either, though, remember.
Yeah,
you know, you
that's-
don't have to
that's
buy,
the
but you're
problem.
not receiving.
don't
The joy of
receive.
having adult money, you can buy your own gift.
Yeah, that's true.
Merry
We're
Christmas.
adulting.
Very
at this
single
stage.
Christmas.
Very single. Last Christmas. But all the Christmas songs are about breaking up, so be a little bit sad. You know, you might go out for a little Christmas you know, festive.
January is a
little
whole
Christmas
new year.
cry.
Yeah, a little Christmas cry.
A little Christmas cry.
Oh, anyway, crying to your mince pie. Get it over in 9 days.
Crying to your pulsating pleasure.
Okay, that's it. Thanks to our guests today, Dubai 92 presenter Jono Hayes and correspondent and columnist Gemma White. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. Goodbye and thank you for joining us.